The future beckons. The problems come when everyone has a different idea of what the future will be, some more problematic than others. Tomorrow Town by Kim Newman. Read by Karl Wallace. This way to the year 2000. The message, in Helvetica typeface, was repeated on arrow-shaped signs. That'll be us, Vanessa, said Richard Jefferson, striding along the platform in the indicated direction, toting his shoulder-slung holdall. He tried to feel as if he were about to time travel from 1971 into the future, though in practice he was just changing trains. Vanessa was distracted by one of the arrow signs, fresh-faced, arranged in a comely frown. Richard's associate was a tall redhead in hot pants, halter, top, beret, and stack-heeled go-go boots, all blindingly white, as if fresh from the machine in a soap powder advert. She drew unconcealed attention from late morning passengers milling about the railway station. Then again, in his lime day-glow blazer edged with gold braid and salmon-pink bell-bottom trousers, so did he. Here in Preston, the fashion watchword for the 18th consecutive season was drab. It's misspelled, said Vanessa. Y-double-E-R. No, it's F-O-N-E-T-I-K, he corrected. Within the next 30 years, English spelling will be rationalized. You reckon? She pouted skeptically. Not my theory, he said, stroking his mandarin mustaches. I assume the lingo will muddle along with magical logic as it has since the year dot. But orthographic reform is a tenet of Tomorrow Town. Alliteration. Very century 21. They had traveled up from London, sharing a rattly first-class carriage and a welcome magnum of Bollinger, with a liberal bishop on a lecture tour titled Peace and the Pill, and a working-class playwright revisiting his Slagheap roots. To conceal their journey, Richard and Vanessa had to change at Preston. The arrows led to a guarded gate. The guard wore a British Rail uniform in shiny black plastic with silver highlights. His oversized cap had a chemical lighting element on the brim. You need special tickets, miss, and said the guard. Said Vanessa, amused. Miss, Richard buzzed at her. He searched through his pockets, finally turning up the special tickets. They were strips of foil, like iron flat chocolate bar wrappers with punched-out hole patterns. The guard carefully posted the tickets into a slot in a metal box. Gears whirred and lights flashed. The gate came apart and sank into the ground. Vanessa stepped to the access first. She seemed to float off, arms out for balance. Best not to be left behind, said the guard. He stepped onto the special platform. Beneath his rubble-soled winkle pickers, a knitted chainmail surface moved on large rollers. It creaked and rippled, but gave a smooth ride. I wonder how it manages corners, Vanessa said. The moving platform conveyed them towards a giant silver bullet. The train of the future hummed slightly, and rested on a single gleaming rail which was raised 10 feet off above the gravel railbed by chromed tubular trestles. A hatchway was open, lowered to form a ramp. Richard and Vanessa clambered through the hatch and found themselves in a space little roomier than an Apollo capsule. They half sat, half lay in over-padded seats which wobbled on gyro gimbals. Safety straps automatically snaked across them and drew tight. Not sure I'll ever get used to this, said Richard. A strap across his forehead noosed his long tangled hair, and he had a free hand to fix it. Vanessa wriggled to get comfortable, doing a near horizontal dance as the straps adjusted to her. With a hiss, the ramp raised and became a hatch cover, then sealed shut. The capsule-cum carriage had berths for 8, but today they were the only passengers. A mechanical voice counted up from 10. Richard, that's a Dalek, said Vanessa, giggling. As if offended, the voice stuttered on 5, like a record stuck in a groove, then hopped to 3. At 0, they heard a rush of rocketry, and the monorail moved off. Richard tensed against the effective G-force slam, but it didn't come. Through his thick glass slit windows, he saw green countryside passing by at about 25 miles per hour. They might have been on a leisurely cycle to the village pub, rather than taking the fast trains of the future. So this is the transport of tomorrow, said Vanessa. A best guess design, explained Richard. That's the point of Tomorrow Town. To experiment with the lives we'll all be living at the turn of the century. No teleportation, then? Don't be silly. Matter transmission is a fantasy. This is a reasonable extrapolation for present day or in development technology. The foundation is rigorous about probabilities. Everything in Tomorrow Town is viable. The community was funded partly by government research grants and partly by private sources. It was predicted it would soon be a profitable concern, with monies pouring in from scientific wonders developed by the visionaries of the new techno-meritocracy. The foundation, which proposed the Town of 2000 experiment, was a think tank, an academic industrial coalition dedicated to applying to present-day life lessons, learning from contemplating the likely future. Tomorrow Town's 2,000-odd citizen volunteers, Zenvols, were boffins, engineers, social visionaries, health food cranks, and science fiction fans. 3 years ago, when the town was given its charter by the Wilson government, there had been a white heat of publicity. Textbook programs hosted by James Burke and Raymond Baxter, picture features in all the Sunday colored supplements, a novelty single, Take Me to Tomorrow by Big Thinks and the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, which peaked at number 2, prevented from being top of the pops by The Crazy World of Arthur Brown's Fire, a line of utopian fashions from Carnaby Street, a heated debate in the letter columns of New Scientist between Arthur C. Clarke, pro, Auberon Waugh, anti, and J.J. Ballard, hard to tell. Then the brouhaha died down and Tomorrow Town was left to go on by itself, mostly forgotten. Until the murder of Vono Zal. Richard Jefferson, agent of the Diogenes Club, least known branch of the United Kingdom's Intelligence and Investigative Services, was detailed to look at this supposedly open and short case and report back to the current Prime Minister on the advisability of maintaining government support for Tomorrow Town. He'd given Vanessa the barest facts. What is the murder weapon the future turn out to be, she asked. Laser beam? Poisoned moon rock? No, the proverbial blunt instrument. Running the side down, really. Anyone who murders the co-founder of Tomorrow Town should have had the decency to stick to the spirit of the game. Doubt if it's much comfort to the deceased, but the offending bludgeon was vaguely futurist, a stylized steel rocket ship with a heavy stone base. No home should be without one. It was a Hugo Award, the highest honor the science fiction field can bestow. Zal won his murder weapon for Best Novelette in 1958 with the oft anthologized Court Martian. Are we then to be the police of the future? Do we get to design our own uniforms? We hear it because Tomorrow Town has no police force as such. It's a fundamental of the social design there will be no crime by the year 2000. Oops. This is a utopian vision, Vanessa. No money to steal. No inequality to foster resentment. All disputes arbitrated with unquestionable fairness. All Zenvols constantly matter for emotional instability. Maybe being constantly monitored leads to emotional instability. Not to mention being called a Zenvol. You'll have to mention that to Big Thinks. See the boss man among equals? Richard chuckled. He's an it. A computer. A very large computer. Vanessa snapped her fingers. Aha! There's your culprit. In every science fiction film I've ever seen, the computer goes power mad and starts killing people off. Big Thinks probably wants to take over the world. The late Zoe would cringe to hear you say that, Vanessa. He'd never have deigned to use such a hackneyed, unlikely premise in a story. A computer is just a heuristic abacus. Big Thinks can beat you with chess, solve logic problems, cut a pop breaker to make the monorail run on time, but it hasn't got sentience, a personality, a motive, or, most importantly, arms. Might as well suspect the fridge freezer with a pop-up toaster. If you knew my pop-up toaster, you'd feel differently. It sits there, shining sneakily, plotting perfidy. The jug kettle is in on it too. There's a conspiracy of contraptions. Now you're being silly. Trust me, Richard. It'll be the brain machine. Make sure to check its alibi. Or better than mind. They first saw Tomorrow Town from across the Yorkshire Dales, nestled in lush green and slate grey. The complex was a large-scale version of a sort of back garden space station that might have been put together by a talented child, inspired by Jerry Anderson and instructed by Valerie Singleton, using egg boxes, toilet roll tubes, the innards of a broken wireless, pipe cleaners, and a lot of silver spray paint. Hexagonal geodesic domes clustered in the landscape, a central space covered by a giant canopy that looked like an especially aerodynamic civil circus tent. Metallized roadways ran between trees and lakes connecting the domes. The light traffic consisted mainly of electric golf carts and one-person hovercraft. A single hardy Zenball was struggling along on what looked like a failed flying bicycle from 1895. It was actually a moped powered by wing-like solar panels. It was raining gently, but the town seemed shielded by a half-bubble climate control barrier that shimmered in mid-air. A pylon held up 3 sun-shaped lamps on a triangular frame. They radiated light and, Richard suspected, heat. Where light fell, the greenery was noticeably greener and thicker. The monorail stepped outside the bubble and settled a little clunkily. "You may now change your apparel," rasped the machine voice. A compartment opened and clothes slid on their racks. The safety straps released them from their seats. Richard thought for a moment that Train had calculated from his long head that he was a woman rather than a man, and realized the garment on offer was unisex, a light white jumpsuit of semi-opaque polythene, with silver epaulettes, pocket, knee, and elbow patches, and modesty strips around the chests and hips. The dangling legs entered in floppy-looking plastic boots, the sleeves in surgeon gloves. "Was that a must?" asked Vanessa. "Best to go on with native customs," said Richard. He turned his back like a gentleman and undressed carefully, folding and putting away his clothes. Then he took a jumpsuit from the rack and stepped into it, wriggling his feet into the boots and fingers into the gloves. A seam from crotch to neck sealed with Velcro strips, but he was left with enormous swaths of polyethylene sprouting from his left hip like a bridle train. "Like this," said Vanessa, who had worked it out. The swaths went over the shoulder in a toga arrangement, passing under an epaulette, clipping on in a couple of places, and falling like a waist-length cape. She'd also found a pad of controls in the left epaulette, which activated drawstrings and pleats that allowed the government to suit individual body types. They both had to fiddle to get the suits to cope with their above-average height, then loosen and tighten various sections as required. Even after every possible button had been twisted every possible way, Richard wore one sleeve tight as sausage skin, while the other was loose and wrinkled as a burst balloon. "Maybe it's a Futopian fashion," suggested Vanessa, who, of course, looked spectacular, shown off to advantage by the modesty strips. "All the dashing Zenballs are wearing the one loose, one tight look the new century. Or maybe it's just aggravated crack pottery." She laughed. The monorail judged they had used up their changing time and lurched off again. The receiving area was as white and clean as a bathroom display at the Belgian Ideal Home exhibition. A deputation of Zenballs, all dressed alike, none with mismatched sleeves, waited on the platform. Synthesized Bach played gently, and the artificial breed was mildly perfumed. "Richards, Vanessa," said a white-haired Zenball, "welcome to Tomorrowtown." A short Oriental girl repeated his words in sign language. "Are you Georgie Jewel?" Richard asked. "Georgie," said the Zenball, and spelled it out. "My condolences," said Richard, shaking the man's hand. Through 2 squeaky layers of latex, he had the impression of sweaty palm. "I understand you and Varnell Zoll were old friends." "Varzy is a tragic loss, a great visioneer." The Oriental girl mimed sadness. Other Zenballs hung their heads. Jeshu's joy of mass desiring segued into the death march from Saul. Was the music heathen somehow to the emotional state of any given assembly? "We founded the foundation together." Back in the 1950s, Varnell Zoll had written many articles and stories for science fiction magazines, offering futuristic solutions to contemporary problems, preaching the gospel of better living through logic and technology. He predicted decimal currency and the virtual takeoff airplane. Georgie Gould was an award-winning editor and critic. He championed Zoll's work, then raised finances to apply solutions to the real world. Richard understood the seed money from the foundation came from a patent the pair held on a kind of battery-powered circular slide rule that was faster and more accurate than any other portable calculating device. Gould was as tall as Richard, with milk-fair skin and close-cropped snow-white hair. He had deep, smile and frown lines on a soft, girlish mouth. He was studying leaking tears, not from grief, but from thick, obvious reactor-like contact lenses that were currently smudged to the darker end of their spectrum. The others involved were an assorted mix, despite their identical outfits. Most of the men were short and tubby, the women lithe and fit, which is either Big Think's recipe for perfect population balance, or some visionary's idea of a good time for a tall, thin fellow. Everyone had hair cut short, which made both Richard and Vanessa obvious outsiders. None of the men wore facial hair except a red-faced chap who opted for the Puritan beard without a mustache arrangement. Go introduced the delegation. The Oriental girl was Moana, whom Gal described as town speaker, though she continued to communicate only by signing. The beardy was Mal K, the senior medico, who presided over the autopsy, matched them body fingerprints, and seemed a bit put out to be taken away from his automated clinic for this ceremonial affair. Other significant Zenvols: Jess F, arbitrage input tech, a hard-faced blonde girl who interferes with Big Thinks when it came to programming dispute decisions, and thus was the nearest thing Tomorrowtown had to a human representative of the legal system, though she was more clerk of the court than investigating officer. Zooty, a fat little agri-terrain rearrangement tech with a bad cold for which he kept apologizing, who turned out to have discovered the body by the hydroponics vats and was oddly impressed and uncomfortable in this group, as if he weren't quite on the level of equality with Gal and the rest. And vocabulary administrator Sue, too, whom Gal introduced as, sadly, the motive, the image of a penitent young lady who would never do it again. Richard mentally marked them all down. You want to visit the scene of the crime, suggested Gal. Interrogate the culprit? We have Buster in as secure a storeroom. It had to be specially prepared. There are no lockable doors to Tomorrowtown. He is nailed in, said Jess F, with rations and a body. Very sensible, commented Richard. We can prise the door open now you're here, said Gal. We're just out for a moment. If you'll pardon me for a moment, said Malkay, I want to get back to my work. I have a batch of antivirus cooking. The medical kept his distance from Zooty. Do you think a streaming nose reflected badly on the house of the future? Was the artificial breeze liable to spread sniffles around the whole community in minutes? I don't see any reason to detain you, Malkay, said Richard. Vanessa might pop over later. My associate is interested in the work you're doing here. New cures for rare diseases. She'd love to squint into a microscope at your antivirus. Vanessa nodded with convincing enthusiasm. Malkay's door is always open, said Yell. The medical sloped off without comment. Should we crack out the crowbar then? Prompted Gal. The co-finder seemed keen on getting on with this. To him, murder case came as an embarrassment and an interruption. It wasn't an uncommon reaction. Richard judged he just wanted all this over with so he can get on with things, even though the victim was one of his oldest friends, and the crime demonstrated a major flaw in the social design of Tomorrowtown. If someone battered Vanessa to death, he didn't think he'd be so intent on putting it behind him, but he was famous for being sensitive. Indeed, it was why he was so useful to the Diogenes Club. I think as long as our putative culprit is safely out of the way, we can afford to take our time, get a feel for the place and the setup. To me, understanding of why is much more important than knowing who or how. I should think the why was obvious to Gal, looking at Sue too, eyes visibly darkening. She looked down. The arbitration went against Buster, and he couldn't accept it, suggests F. Though it was an initial contract that he abide by Big Think's decisions. Happens sometime, not often. An arbitration in the matter of the heart? Interesting. Just the sort of thing that comes in a box marked motive and tied with pink string. Thank you so much for mentioning it early in the case. Before we continue the sleuthing, perhaps we could have lunch. Vanessa and I have traveled a long way with no sustenance beyond British Rail sandwiches and a beverage of our own supply. Let's break bread together and you can tell me more about your fascinating experiment. Communal meals are at fixed times, said Gal. The next not until 6. I make it about 6 o'clock, said Richard, though his watch face was blurred by the sleeve glove. It's only F5 by our clock, said Su2. We're on 2 daily cycles of 10 chronons. Each chronon runs 100 centicronons. In your time, a chronon is 72 minutes, explained Gal. Our 60-year Vanessa did the calculation and beat the slide rule designer. 12 minutes past 7. That's about it. Richard waved away the objection. After a snack can be rustled up. Where do you take these communal meals? Moana signaled a direction and set off. Richard was happy to follow, and the others came too. The dining area was in the central plaza, under the pylon of the 3 globes, with zinc and chrome sheet and tube tables and benches. It was warm under the globes, almost Caribbean, and some Zenfalls wore poker players' eye shades. In the artificially balmy climate, plastic garments tended to get sticky inside, which make for creaky shifting in seats. An abstract ornamental fountain gushed nutrient-enriched, slightly carbonated, highly fluoridized water. Gal had Moana fetch a couple of jugs for the table, while the meek Su2 hustled off to persuade sustenance preparation techs to break their schedule to feed the visitors. Vanessa cocked an eyebrow at this division of labor, and Richard remembered Zool and Gal had been planning this utopia since the 50s, well before the publication of The Female Eunuch. Even Jess F., whom Richard has pegged as the toughest Zenval he had yet met, broke out the metallized glass tumblers from the dispenser by the fountain, while Gal and the sniffling Zudi sat at their ease at table. Is that the building where Big Think lives? Asked Vanessa. Gal swiveled the look. Vanessa met an imposing structure, rather like a giant Art Deco fridge decorated with mondrian squares and a rough schematic of a human face. Uniformly dressed Zenvals came and went through airlock doors that opened and closed with hisses of decontaminant. Gal grinned impishly. Miss Vanessa, that building is Big Think's. Richard whistled. BT didn't used to be that size, said Jess F. Varzy kept insisting we add units. More and more complicated questions need more and more space. Soon we'll have to expand further. Doesn't show any telltale signs of megalomania? Asked Vanessa. Never programs Wagner for 8 straight hours and turtles over maps of the world? Jess F. didn't look as if he thought it was funny. BT is a machine. Su2 came back with food. Killer pills that looked like Smarties but tasted like chalk. All the nutrition you need is here, said Gal, in the water and the capsules. For us, mealtimes are mostly a ceremonial, for debate and reflection. Varzy said some of his best ideas popped into his head while he was chattering idly after a satisfying pill. Richard didn't doubt it. He also still felt hungry. Talking of things popping into Zool's head, he said, what's the story on Buster of the bloody fingerprints? Jess F. looked at Su2 as expected to be contradicted and then carried on. Big Thinks assessed the dispute situation and arbitrated it best for the community if Su2 were to be pair bonded with Varzy rather than Buster. Buster was your old boyfriend? Vanessa asked Su2. He's my husband, she said. On the outside, in the past, put on Jess F. Here we don't always acknowledge arbitrary pair bondings. Mostly to serve a useful purpose and continue. This instance, the dispute was more complicated. Big Things arbitrated against the arbitrary, mused Richard. I suppose no one will be surprised at that. He looked from face to face and fixed on Su2, then asked, Did you leave Buster for Mr. Zool? Su2 looked for a cue, but none came. It was best for the town. For the experiment, she said. Well, what was it for you? For your husband? Buster had been regraded, from Zenval to Zenpass. He couldn't vote. Richard looked to Jess F. for explanation. He knew his gal had to give her a teary wink from Nova's black eyes before she said anything more. We have very few citizen passengers, she said. It's not a punishment category. Kind of you to clarify that, said Richard. I might have made a misconclusion otherwise. You say Zenpasses have no vote? It's not so dreadful, said Gal, sipping the nutrients. On the outside, on the past, stuff is restricted by age, sanity, residence, and so on. Here in our techno-meritocracy, To register for a vote, which gives you a voice in every significant decision, you have to demonstrate your applied intelligence. An IQ test? Not a quotient, Richard. Anyone can have that. The key vital factor is application. BT tests for that. There's no personality or human tangle involved. Surely it's only fair the most useful should have the most say? I have a vote, said Zudi, proud, earned by applied intelligence. Indeed he does, said Cal, smiling. And Mr. Georgie had 15 votes, because he implies his intelligence more often than I do. Everyone looked at Zudi with different types of amazement. It's only fair, said Zudi, content despite a nose trickle, washing down another purple pill. Richard wondered whether the terrain rearrangement tech was hovering near regrading as a Zen pass. Richard addressed Sue too. What did your husband do? He's a history teacher and educationist, very valuable. Gal looked as if his pill was sour. Your present is our past, Mr. Richard. Buster's discipline is surplus. Doesn't the future grow out of the past? To know where you're going, you must know where you've been. Varzi believes in a radical break. But Varzi is in the past, too. Indeed. Regrettable. We must think of the future. It's where we're going to spend the rest of our lives, said Zudi. That's very clever, said Vanessa. Zudi wiped his nose and puffed up a bit. I think we should hand Buster over to you, said Gal, to be taken outside to face the justice of the past. Zarvi left working on we must continue. Not just yet, said Richard. The sad business raises questions about Tomorrow Town. I have to look beyond the simple crime before I make a report. I'm sure you'll understand and will extend full cooperation. No one said anything, but they all constructed smiles. You must be economically self-supporting by now, continued Richard. Over the research and inventions you've been applying intelligence to. If the Prime Minister withdrew government subsidies, you'd probably be better off. Free of the apron strings, as it were. Still, the extra cash must come in handy for something, even if you don't use money in this town. Gal gluffed his eyes and kept smiling. Richard could really do with a steak and kidney pie and chips, washed down with beer. Even a Kit Kat would have been welcome. Have you a guest apartment we can use? Gal's smile turned real. Sadly, we're at maximum optimal Zenval residency. No excess space wastage in the living quarters. No spare beds, clarified Zudi. Then we'll have to take the one living space we knew to be free. Gal's brow furrowed like a rocked-up rug. Zul's quarters, Richard explained. We'll set up camp there. Sue, too, you must know the way. Since there are no locks, we won't need keys to get in. Zenval has been fascinating. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Richard and Vanessa stood up, and Sue too followed suit. Gal and Jess F. glared. I wanted to wave bye-bye. What are you looking for? Vanessa asked. Monitoring devices? No, said Richard, unsealing another compartment. There are the light fittings and the communicator screens that seem to have been disabled by Zul or his murderer, presumably. There was a constant hum of gadgetry in the walls and behind white front compartments. The ceiling was composed of translucent panels above which glowed a steady light. The communicator screen was dusty. Beneath the on-off switch, volume and brightness knobs, and channel selector was a telephone dial, with its Tomorrow Town alphabet, no Q or X. Richard had tried to call London, but a recorded voice from a cartoony smiling face told them that visiphones only worked within the town limits. Use of telephone lights at the outside had to be approved by vote of Zenval Visioneers. In the compartment he found a gadget whose purpose was a mystery. It had dials, a trumpet, and 3 black rubber nipples. I'm just assuming, Vanessa, that the co-founder of Tomorrow Town might allow himself to sample the forbidden past in ways denied the simple Zenval or despised Zen pass? You mean? He might have real food stashed somewhere. Vanessa started opening compartments too. It took a full hour to search the 5 rooms of Zen's bungalow. They set up a complete run of Town magazine, a microfilm publication with all text in phonetic, and a library of 1950s science fiction magazines, lurid covers mostly promising Varno Zoll stories as backup to Awesome over Heinlein. They found many compartments stuffed with ring-bound textbooks which dated back 20 years. Richard flicked through a couple, noticing Zhu had either been using phonetics since the early 50s or with such a bad speller his editors must have been driven to despair. Most of the entries were simple sentences, story ideas, possible inventions, or prophecies. Tunnel under Irish Sea, rocket to sun to harvest heat, big lift to orbit, stupas not allowed to breed, holes in head for plugs. Vanessa found a display case full of plaques and awards in the shapes of spirals or robots. Is this the murder weapon? Vanessa asked, indicating a needle-shaped robot. Looks too clean. I believe Zoe was a multiple Hugo winner. See, this is best short story 1957 for Vesta Interests. The blunt instrument was... Vanessa picked up a chunk of ceramic and read the plaque. Best novelette 1958. It was a near duplicate of the base of the other award. You could see where the rocket ship was fixed. Must have been broken when the award was lifted in anger. Cold blood, Vanessa. The body and Hugo were found elsewhere. No blood traces in these quarters. Let's keep looking for a pork pie. Vanessa opened a floor-level compartment and out crawled a matte black robot spider the size of an armored go-kart. The fearsome thing brandished of death implements that upon closer examination turned out to be a vacuum cleaner proboscis and limbs tipped with chamois, a dump squeegee, and a brush. Oh, how useful, said Vanessa. Then the spider squirted hot water at her and crackled. Electrical circuits burned out behind its photo eyes. The proboscis coughed black soot. Or maybe not. I've seen the future and it works, quoted Richard. Lincoln Steffens on the Soviet Union, 1919. What's to become of my bit of watching when there's no watching to do? Quoted Vanessa. The old woman in The Man in the White Suit, Technological Progress, 1951. You suspect a diabolical big think sent his cleaning robot to murder of Arno Zoll? A Frankensteinian rebellion against the master creative? If BT was so clever, I doubt he'd use this arachnoid dude as an assassin. Think I'd even beat it as it sweeps as it cleans, let alone carry out a devilish murder plan. Besides, to use the blind instrument would have to climb a wall, and I reckon this can't manage stairs. Richard poked the carapace of the machine, which wriggled and lost a couple of limbs. You still hungry? Famished. Yet we've had enough nourishment to keep body and spirit together for the 10 long chronons that remain until breakfast time. I'll ask Medical Mal K if he sees many cases of rickets and scurvy in Utopia. You do that. Richard tried to feel sorry for the spider, but it was just a gadget. It was impossible to invest it with a personality. Vanessa was thinking, what's the idea that Tomorrow Town would pour forth 21st century solutions to our drab old 1970s problems? Richard answered her. That's what Mr. Wilson thought he was signing up for. So why aren't Mrs. Mop Spiders on sale in the Charing Cross Road? Doesn't seem to work all that well. What is that about, Richard? A monorail that will lose a race with Stevenson's rocket. Techno meritocratic droid de senor. Concentrated food astronauts wouldn't eat. Robots less functional than the wind-up ones my nephew Paula uses to conquer the playground. And I've seen the odd hovercraft up on blocks with out-of-order signs. Not to mention Buster the Basher, living incarnation of a society out of joint. Good points all, he said, and I asked him as soon as I solve another mystery. What's that? What are we supposed to sleep on? Around the rooms were large soft white cubes which distinctly resembled furniture, but could have easily been tofu chunks for the giants which would evolve by the turn of the millennium. By collecting enough cubes into a windowless room where the lighting piles were more subdued, Richard and Vanessa were able to put together a bed shape. However, when Richard took an experimental lie-down on a jigsaw puzzle affair, an odd cube squared out of place and he fell through the gap. The floor was covered with a warm, fleshy plastic substance that was peculiarly unpleasant to the touch. None of the many compartment cupboards in the bungalow contained anything resembling 20th century pillows or bedding. Heating elements on the floor turned up as the evening wore on, adjusting the short temperature of the room to the point where their all-over condoms were extremely uncomfortable. Escaping from the Tomorrowtown costumes was much harder than getting into them. It occurred to Richard and Vanessa at the same time these spacesuits would make going to the lavatory awkward. Though they reasoned that an old pill diet would minimize the wasteful toilet breaks required in the past. Eventually, with some cooperation, they got free and placed the suits on hangers on a glass-fronted cupboard, which, when closed, filled with colored steam. Decontamination complete, flashed a sign as the cabinet cracked open and spilled liquid residue. The floor was discolored when this had happened before. Having more or less puzzled out how the bedroom worked, they set about tackling the bathroom. It seemed to be equipped with a dental torture chamber and a wide variety of exotic marital aids. By the time they were done playing with it all, incidentally washing and cleaning their teeth, it was past 10 midnight and the lights turned off automatically. "Night-night," said Richard. "Don't let the robot bugs bite," said Vanessa. He woke up, alert. She woke with him. "What's the matter? A noise?" "No," he said. "No noise." "Ah." The Tomorrowtown hum, gadgets on the walls, was silenced. The bungalow was technologically dead. He reached out and touched the floor. It was cooling. Silently, they got off the bed. The room was dark, but they knew where the door, a sliding screen, was, and took up positions on either side of it. The door had opened by touching a pad. Now that the power was off, they were shut in, a flaw in the no-locks policy. Though Richard heard a winding creak as the door lurched open an inch. There was some sort of clockwork backup system. A gloved hand reached into the room. It held an input consisting of a plastic handle, 2 long thin metal rods, and a battery pack. A blue arc buzzed between the rods, suggesting lethal charge. Vanessa took the wrist, careful not to touch the rods, and gave a good yank. The cutting prod, or whatever it was dropped and discharged against the floor, leaving a blackened patch and a nasty smell. Surprised, the intruder stumbled against the door. As far as Richard could make out in the minimal light, the figure wore the usual Tomorrowtown suit. In addition was an opaque black egg-shaped helmet with a silver strip around the eyes, which he took to be a one-way mirror. A faint red radiance suggested some sort of infrared see-in-the-dark device. Vanessa, who had put on a floral bikini of sleepwear, kicked the egghead in the chest, which clanged. She hopped back. "It's armored," she said. "All who defy Buster must die," rasped the speaker in the helmet. Vanessa kicked again, at the shins, cutting the egghead down. "All who defy Buster must die," squeaked the speaker, sped up. "All who ... The recorded message was stuck. The egghead clambered upright. "Is there a person in there?" Vanessa asked. "A way to find out," said Richard. He hammered the egghead with a bed cube, but it was too soft to dent the helmet. The intruder lunged and caught him in a plastic and a metal grasp. "Get him off me," he said, kicking. Unarmored, he was at a disadvantage. Vanessa nipped into the ensuite bathroom and came back with a gadget on a length of metal hose. They decided it was probably a water pick for those hard-to-clean crannies. She stabbed the end of the device at the egghead's neck, puncturing the plastic seal just below the chin rim of the helmet, and turned the nozzle on. The tappet key snapped off her fingers, and a high-pressure stream that could have drilled through cheddar cheese spurted into the suit. Gallons of water inflated the egghead's garment. The suit self-sealed around the puncture and expanded, arms and legs forced out at an X. Richard felt the water pressure swelling his captor's chest and arms. He wriggled and got free. All who defy Buster. Circuits burned out and leaks spiraled in all the seams. Even through the silver strip, Richard made out the water rising. There was a commotion in the next room. Lights came on. The hum was back. It occurred to Richard he had opted to sleep in the buff and might not be in a decorous state to receive visitors. Then again, in the future, taboos against social nudity were likely to evaporate. George Gall, the ever-present Moana, and Jess F., who had another of the Zapper Pod devices, stood just inside the doorway. There was a long pause. This was not what anyone had expected. "Buster has escaped," said Gall. "We thought you might be in danger. He's beyond all reason." "If he's endangered us, he wasn't any longer," said Richard. "This is him," Richard said. He was evoking the name. The egg was on the floor, spouting torrents. super inflated like the Michelin Man after a 3-day eating contest. Vanessa kicked the helmet. It obligingly repeated, "All who defy Buster must die." The heads waved hands like fat starfish, thumbing towards the helmet, which is sturdier than the rest of the suit and not leaking. "Anyone know how to get this thing off?" asked Richard. The egghead writhed and was still. "Might be a bit on the late side." Gal and Joseph looked at each other. Wanda took action and posted in the room. She knelt and worked a few buttons around the chin rim of the helmet. The egghead cracked along a hitherto unsuspected crooked seam and came apart in a gush of water. "That's not Buster," said Vanessa. "It's Malkay, the medico. And he's drowned," concluded Richard. "A useful rule of thumb in open and shut cases," announced Richard, "is that when someone tries to murder any investigating officers, the case isn't as open and shut as it first might have seemed." He put on a quilted double-breasted 4-length jade green dressing gown with a blinking red dragon picked out on the chest in sequins. "When a would-be murderer is one of the major proponents of the open and shut theory," he concluded, "it's a dead certain injustice is in the process of being perpetrated. Ergo, the errand buster is innocent and someone else murdered Mr. Zoll with a Hugo award." "Perhaps it was a misunderstanding," said Gal. Richard and Vanessa looked at him. "How so?" Richard asked. Wheels worked behind Gal's eyes, which were amber now. "Malkay might have heard of Buster's escape and came here to protect you from him. In the dark and confusion, you mistook his attempted rescue with an attack. And tragedy followed," repeated Joseph. Moana weighed invisible balls and looked non-committal. It was 68 past 6:00 chronon. The body had been removed and they were in Zool's front room. Since all the cubes were in the bedroom and wet through, everyone had to sit on the body temperature floor. Vanessa perched decorously, see-through peignoir over her bikini on the dead robot spider. Richard stood as if lecturing. "Georgie, you were an editor once," he said. "If a story was submitted in which a robot hero wanted to protect innocent parties from a rash-chasing killer, would you have allowed the author to have the hero get into disguise, turn off all the lights, and creep in the bedroom with a lethal weapon?" I might. I edited science fiction magazines. Science fiction is about ideas, no matter what those new waivers say. In SF, characters might do anything." "What about all who defied Buster must die?" said Vanessa. "A warning?" Gal ventured feebly. "Oh, give up," said Joseph. "Malkay was a bad one. It's been obvious for Desi years. All those speeches about expanding the remit of the social experiment and assuming pole position in the larger techno-meritocracy. He was in a position to doctor his own records to cover up instability. He was also the one who matched Buster's fingerprints to the murder weapon. Congratulations, you've caught the killer." "Open and shut and open and shut?" suggested Richard. Moana gave a thumbs up. "I'm going to need help to convince myself of this," said Richard. "I decided to call on mighty deductive brain power to get to the bottom of the mystery." "More yesterday men?" said Joseph, appalled. "Interesting term. You've been careful not to use it before now. Is that what you call us?" "No, I don't intend to summon any more applause from the outside." Gallo couldn't suppress his surge of relief. "I decided to apply the techniques of tomorrow to those crimes of the future. Joseph, I'll need your help. Let's take this puzzle to big things and see how your mighty computer does." Shudders came down behind Joseph's eyes. "Computer time is precious," said Gal. "So is human life," answered Richard. The inside of the building, the insides of Big Thinks, was the messiest area Richard had seen in Tomorrowtown. Banks of metal cabinets filled with reels of tape were connected by a spaghetti tangle of wires that wound throughout the building like colored plastic ivy. Some cabinets had their fronts off, showing masses of circuit boards, valves, and transistors. Surprisingly, the workings of the master brain seemed held together with a great deal of sellotape, string, and blue tack. Richard recognized some components well in advance of any on the market, and others that might date back to Marconi or Babbage. "We've been making adjustments," said Joseph. She sifted a cardboard box full of plastic shapes from a swivel chair and went to sit at her desk piled with wired-together TV sets. To one side was a paper towel dispenser, which coughed out a steady roll of graph paper with lines squiggled on it. He didn't know which knobs to twiddle. Joseph, can you show me how a typical dispute or arbitration is made? Say the triangle of Azul, Buster, and Sue 2? That documentation might be hard to find. In this utopia of efficiency? I doubt it. Joseph nodded to Moana, who scurried off to root through large bins full of scrunched and torn paper. Vanessa was with Gal and Zudi, taking a tour of the hydroponic zone, which was where the body of Arnold Zoll had been found. The official story was that Buster, now Mel K, had gone to Zul's bungalow to kill him, but found him not at home. He'd taken Hugo from a display case and searched out the victim to be, found him contemplating the green gunk that was made into his favorite pills, and did the deed then and there. Didn't take a computer to decide it was more likely that Zul had been killed when the weapon was handy for an annoyed impulse assassin to reach for, than hovercrafted along with a murder weapon to a public place, so some uninvolved Zenval clot could find him. But why ferry the body all that way with the added risk of being caught? Tell you what, Joseph, let's try BT out on a hypothetical dispute. Put in the setup of Hamlet and see what the computer thinks is best for Denmark. Bate thinks it's not a toy. Moana came back waving some sheets of paper. Richard looked over it. Joseph ground her teeth. Though the top sheet was headed Input Tech Buster Monroe, this was not a triangular dispute documentation. Richard scrolled through the linked printout. He saw maps of Northern Europe, lists of names and dates, depositions in non-phonetic English, German and Danish, and enough footnotes for a good-sized doctoral thesis. In fact, that's exactly what this was. I'm not the first to think of running a hypothetical dispute past the mighty computer, said Richard. The much-maligned Buster got there before me, and wound up recategorized as an impasse, said Jess F. He tried to get an answer to the Svesig Holstein question, didn't he? Or promised that only 3 men in Europe ever got to the bottom of it. One who forgot, one who died, and one who went mad. It was an insanely complicated arrangement between Denmark and Germany over the governance of a couple of border provinces. Buster put the question to Big Things as if it were a contemporary dispute, just to see how the computer would have resolved it. What did it suggest? Nuclear attack? Is that why all the redecoration? Buster's puzzle blew all the fuses. Richard found the last page. The words forgot, died, mad were repeated over and over in very faint ink. Then some mathematical formulae. Then the printer equivalent to scribble. This makes no sense. He showed it to Jess F, hoping she could interpret it. He really would have liked Big Things to have got to the bottom of the tussle and defeated Bismarck and Metternich and spat out the binding of simple answer anyone should have seen all along. No, she murmured. It makes no sense at all. Moana shrugged. Richard felt a rush of sympathy for Jess F. This was painful for her. BT can't do it, said Richard. The machine can do sums very fast, but nothing else? Jess F was almost on the point of tears. That's not true, she said with tattered pride. Big Things is the most advanced computer in the world. It can solve any logic problem. Given the data, they can deliver accurate weather forecasts, arrange schedules to optimize the efficiency of any number of tasks. But throw the logic at it, so BT just has a good cry. It's a machine, it can't cry. Or arbitrate love affairs. Joseph was in a corner. It's not fair, she said quietly. It's not BT's fault, it's not my fault. They knew the operational parameters. They gave the system a tackle ideas outside of its remit, expanding, tampering, overburdening. My techs have been working all the hours of the day. Chronon, surely? All the bloody chronons of the day, just trying to get Big Things working again. If after all this, the ridiculous demands keep coming through. Big Things, Big Things. Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? Big Things, Big Things. Is there life on other planets? Joseph put her hands over her face. They? Who are they? All of them, Joseph sobbed. Across all disciplines. Who especially? Who else? Varno Zoll. Not anymore? No. She looked up behind her hands, horrified. It wasn't me, she said. I know. You're left-handed. Wrong wound pattern. One more question. What did the late M.K. want from Big Things? Joseph gave an appalled sigh. Now he was cracked. He kept pouring on these convoluted, specific questions. And then they were all about taking over the country. He wanted to run the whole of the United Kingdom like Tomorrow Town. The day after Tomorrow World? He kept putting in plans and strategies for infiltrating vital industries and dedicating himself to the cause. Didn't have an army, but he Big Things to get all the computers on the country on his side. Most of the Zenfall thought he was the dreamer, spinning on the best case scenario at the meetings. But he meant it. He wanted to found a large scale techno meritocracy. Was himself his beloved leader? No, that's how mad he was. Wanted Big Things to run everything. He was hoping to put BT in charge and let the future happen. That's why he wanted Vanessa and me out of the story. We were a threat to his funding. Without subsidies, the plug is pulled. One thing BT can do is keep track of figures. As a community, Tomorrow Town is in the red. Enormously. There's no money here, though. Of course not. We spent it. And spend money we don't have. The next money roll from Preston is liable to be crowded with dunning bailiffs. Richard thought about it. He was rather saddened by the truth. Would have been nice if the future worked. He wondered if Leek and Steffens had any second thoughts during the Moscow purge trials. What threat was Zool to Malkay, he asked. Joseph frowned. That's the oddest thing. Zool was the one who really encouraged Malkay to work on his coup plans. He did see himself as, what did you call it, beloved leader? All his stories were about intellectual Superman taking charge of the world and sorting things out. If anything, he was the visioneer of the Tomorrow takeover. He'd have jumped to anything in skirts if Fem's ends were skirts here. Richard remembered the quivering Sue, too. So we're back to Buster in the conservatory with the Hugo Award? I always said it was him, said Joseph. You couldn't blame him, but he did it. We shall see. Sirens sounded. Moana put her fingers in her ears. Joseph looked even more stricken. That's not a good sign, is it? The communal meal area outside Big Things swarmed with plastic-caped Zenvols, looking up and pointing, panicking and screaming. The three light globes, Tomorrow Town suns, shone whiter and radiated hotter. Richard looked at the backs of his hands. They were tanning almost as quickly as an instant photograph develops. The fool, said Joseph. He's tampered with the master controls. Buster will kill us all. It's the only thing he has left. Zenfales piled into the community-owned electric carts perched in a rank to one side of the square. When they proved too heavy to the vehicles, they started throwing each other off. Holes mounted in the canopy of the globes. Sizzling drops of molten plastic fell into screaming Tomorrow Townies. The sirens shrilled, urging everyone to panic. Richard saw Vanessa through the throng. She was Vizzuti, no gal. One-man hovercraft burdened with 6 clinging Zenfalls charged past inch by inch, outpaced by someone on an old-fashioned, non-solar powered bicycle. If the elements reach critical, said Joseph, Tomorrow Town will blow up. A banner-like strip of paper curled out of a slit in the front of Big Things. Your computer wants to say goodbye, said Richard. Circuit breaker number 15. Not much of a farewell. Ziddy walked between falling drips to the central column which supported the 3 globes. He opened the hatch and pulled the switch. The artificial suns went out. Real sunlight came through the holes in the canopy. Now that's what computers can do, said Joseph, elated. Execute protocols. If this happens, then that order must be given. The Zenfall seemed happier about her computer now. Richard was grateful for a ditch digger who could read. This is where the body was? He asked Ziddy. There were swimming pool-sized tanks of green gunk dotted with yellow and brown patches since the interruption of the light source. Bit of a haul from Zool's place. The murder body was carried here? Asked Vanessa. Not just the body, the murder weapon too. Who lives in that bungalow? On the small hill is a bungalow not quite as spacious as Zool's. One of the masses of hutches placed between the silver pathways, with a crown of solar panels on the flat roof and a dish antenna. Georgie, said Moana. So you do speak. She nodded her head and smiled. Gowl sat on an off-white cube in the gloom. The stored power was running down. Only filtered sunlight got through his main room. It was as if his background had been removed. All the substance of his face had fallen to his jowls. Richard looked at him. Nice try with the globes. Sure remembered the circuit breaker, though. Only diabolical masterminds construct their private estates with built-in self-destruct systems. In the future, as in the past, it's unlikely that town halls would have bombs in the basement ready to go off in the event that the outgoing mayor wants to take the whole community with him rather than hand over the chain of office. Gal didn't say anything. Vanessa went straight to a shelf and picked up the only award in the display. It was another Hugo. Best fan editor in 1958, she read from the plaque. The rocket ship came away from its base. You killed him here, said Richard. Broke your own Hugo. Left the bloody rocket ship with the body outside. Then, when you calmed down a bit, you remembered Zool had won the same award. Several, in fact. You sneaked over to his bungalow, no locks, how convenient, and broke one of his Hugos, taking the rocket to compete with yours. You made it look as if you were killed with his own award, and you were out of the loop. If only you got round to developing the glue of the future and fixed the thing properly, it wouldn't be so obvious. It's plain that, though you've devoted your life to planning out the details of the future, your one essay in the fine art of the murder was a rushed, botched-up job done on the spur of the moment. You haven't really improved on Kane. At least Mal K made the effort with a spacesuit and the zapper prod. George E. said Joseph. Why? Good question, Richard thought. After a long pause, Goward gathered himself and said, Varna was destroying Tomorrow Town. He had so many ideas. Every morning before breakfast he had 4 or 5. All the time, constantly. Radio transmitters the size of a pinhead. Cheap infinite energy from tapping the planet's core. Solar-powered personal flying machines. Robots to do everything. Robots to make robots to do anything. An operation to extend human lifespans threefold. Rules and regulations about who was fit to have and raise children, with gonad block implants to enforce them. Hats to collect the electrical energy of the brain and use it to power a personal headlamp. Non-stop, unrelenting, unstoppable. Ideas, ideas, ideas. Richard was frankly astonished by the man's vehemence. Isn't that what you wanted? But Varno did the easy bit. Once he tossed out an idea, it was up to me to make it work. Me or Big Thinks or some other plotting Zenval. 9 of 10 of the ideas couldn't work. Couldn't ever work. It was always our fault for not making it work. Never his for foisting them off on us. This town would have been perfect if it hadn't been for his ideas. And his bloody, dreadful spelling. Back in the 50s, what do you think tied up all the stories so they were publishable? Couldn't write a sentence that scanned, and rather than learn how, he decreed the language should be changed. Not just the spelling. He had a plan to go through the dictionary, crossing out all the words that were no longer needed, to make it a crime to teach them to children. Something to do with his old public school. He said he wanted to make grunge extinct within a generation. But he had these wonderful, wonderful, ghastly, terrible ideas. It made you sick. And the maniac who wanted to rule the world? Him too. He had ideas. Gallo was pleading now, hands fists around imaginary bludgeons. If only I could have had ideas, he said. They'd have been good ones. The monorail was out of commission. Most things were. Some Zenfalls, like Joseph, were relieved not to have to pretend that everything worked perfectly. They had years, months, damn it, of complaining bottled up inside and were pouring it out to each other in one big whine-in under the dead white heat globes. Richard and Vanessa looked out across the dales. A small vehicle was plodding along a winding and logical lane that had been laid out not by a computer but by wandering sheep. It wasn't the police, though, and they were on the way. Who do you think this is? Asked Vanessa. It'll be Buster. He's bringing it outside to Tomorrow Town. He was with you yesterday, man at heart. A car horn honked. Zenfalls, some already changed out of plastic suits, paid attention. Zoo, too, was excited, hopeful, fearful. She turned to Moana, who smiled and waved. Someone cheered. Others joined. What's he driving? Asked Vanessa. Looks like a relic from the past. For these people, it's deliverance, said Richard. It's a fish and chip van. The end.